project the proper tone, and it's not what the is currently the most important right now. So we'll be talking about the George Floyd's death, current updates in regards to the case, protests that have been taking place all over the country, racism in America, and where we can go from here. So said that we decided as a unit that that's what we thought would be the most fair to the situation. So just as a current update. So Sean, we'll start with you as always with first thoughts.
Gotcha, man. What a week, right?
Yeah.
As we speak right now, choppers are circling above San Antonio, just capturing the events that are unfolding. These events that have stretched not only outside of Minneapolis, but across the globe. We've seen protests and riots as far as London and Paris. I was moved enough. I know all three of us went out to participate in the protests, and what we're going to do today is kind of tell you a little bit about our experiences and things that we saw firsthand.
Yeah. My first thought, and something that's overwhelmed a lot of my thoughts throughout this week, is how it's these types of things. This is nothing new. Unfortunately, that we've seen this many times before. That the newness of this might be the fact that the limited distractions that we have, losing sports, movies,
right,
other pop culture events that we have going on that serve as a numbing agent to our country and it's just such an easy distraction for what really matters. And I think this is such a crucial time that we don't have those. The things that matter are breaking through a little easier. We don't have LeBron. We don't have the next great Marvel movie. We don't have the next DiCaprio movie. It's what's happening right now, and so I think it's a crucial and interesting thing, and something that we should take note of. Even though basketball is what brought us all together, it needs to be, things need to be put into perspective on what's important. So that's the thing that's really kind of broken through to me, JB.
Man, I as most of you well know, and I know you two guys know, this is it's a pivotal moment in the nation's history, and not everybody gets to see times like these and experience times like these. And the nation's at a crossroads, and so it's really not. People will try to tell you that it's a huge political thing, and it's not. It's a moral thing. It's a personal thing. The nation's at a crossroads, and there are many cases where you're allowed to be on the fence about something. And in my humble opinion, this is not one of those times. And so yeah, I mean, it's interesting to live in these times, and to see where people that you love and people that and and your fellow countrymen. It's interesting to see where people stand and what side they're actually going to take.
Absolutely. So to delve into our first topic, just want to first give a little bit of an update for those of you that haven't heard. This is pretty recent news. Derek Chauvin's charges upgraded from third degree to second degree in light of the evidence. Arrest warrants were issued for the other three officers in aiding and abetting murder in the second degree. First degree is premeditated. Second degree, initially killing with an element of malice, coming with a 40-year maximum. Third degree murder is a homicide which lacks intent to kill, comes with a 25-year minimum. So let's start off with the protests. We want to be very specific, I think, when we're talking about this, because to me, it's the absolute truth that there's going to be two different terms that are very different between protests and riots. It's not going to be on this podcast. They won't be spoken the same way, because they're two completely different things. And I think that's something that gets lost in the great part of our population is that the difference between those two phrases. But Sean, what are some of your thoughts on your personal experiences with the protests? You talked about how you've been a part of it as well, and so what are your first thoughts on the protests and their
we're not gonna I don't feel it's necessary to dive into the the definitions between. I think we're all on the same page, and everybody understands the difference between a protest and a riot, and the element of violence and looting. And nobody that I've come across is condoning the looting, or nobody that I keep in my circle is condoning the looting or the riots. Although I will say that we understand where it's coming from. We understand that people are acting out and why they're acting out. That doesn't mean that we agree with what they're doing, but we clearly understand where they're coming from. But just some of my quick initial takes. Going downtown, I was very proud. We went the first night we went out was that Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday night.
Saturday night. I was proud to see 5,000 plus people in San Antonio moved enough to get off their couch and and go downtown and let their voices be heard. I understand people are still at home because of COVID or for other concerns, and not everybody that wanted to be out there were able to get down there. But I was proud to see the 98 or 99% of people in our city that were moved enough to go down there, and they did so in a peaceful manner. So that was my biggest short takeaway from that.
Yeah. JB,
man, I will piggyback a bit off what Sean said, but not entirely. He and I were there, we were there together on Saturday, and on one hand, I was also super proud. I mean, you'd be hard found to find a more diverse crowd than what we were in.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's really, really encouraging and peaceful. I mean, this is a march that went from Travis Park all the way around to police headquarters and then all the way back to the Alamo. So it's not a brisk walk. Like, it was a literal march, and really, really cool for almost as far as your eye could see. People flooded the streets, and it was peaceful the entire time. Very encouraged that people came out and that people are showing solidarity for something that didn't happen in their backyard, but that doesn't, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But then on that other hand, and I know sometimes I'm the negative guy, and I don't know. I don't want to be overly negative, but on the other hand, when we arrived to Alamo Plaza, there are gun enthusiasts, Second Amendment guys there,
yeah.
And we'll get into that a little bit later. But definitely intensified the scenario, the situation, and police presence was in the hundreds. So it was a very tense time. So there's been protests since then, but this one, when you've got protesters in the thousands, it got nasty later on. And I'll just say this: it was not because of what the majority of the protesters were doing. And so in San Antonio and in cities around the country, I've been extremely disturbed by not just reports, visual evidence of police brutality against peaceful protesters. So as encouraged as I am, and as proud as I was to be a part of it, and as proud as I am of people of San Antonio showing solidarity for something that happened at the northernmost end of the country, the negative part sticks out to me, and that now we have people are starting to see what the issue actually is. It's like, oh well, I'm a white person and was subjected to tear gas without being armed, without committing a crime, or somebody saying, well, I'm Hispanic and I got shot with a rubber bullet or with a beanbag or something like that, and didn't commit a crime. And so that's been disturbing, and that's something that's been heavy on my mind this entire time. So the progress is nice, but the negatives are there too.
I'm gonna go to the positive. It's not gonna detract from anything that you said. I just saw something that I thought was really, really important to me. That we all as a group went to the protest Tuesday. It was the first time that particular group had gathered, and I ended up going again today with a player of mine that I coached, and the organizers were probably 22 to 24-year-old young kids, and I was so proud of there was a community to it. That the first day was a little unorganized, to be honest. It wasn't. We didn't know exactly where we're going, and by day 2, the final spot has voter registration booths. They have KINS 5 there waiting. They had I thought it was very moving that they had everybody get on the ground for 9 minutes, and 9 minutes is no short time.
Well, no, it's just see how that feels.
And it was very powerful to me. I was impressed at the rapid improvement in a short amount of time. So I left a little inspired by the group of people that I think rapidly grew out of that. And so that was something, a real positive so between those two times, I think I was with them, about 6-7 hours. And I want to be very clear that not only did we not see any violence from them, there was a short period of time where just 3 or 4 water bottles were thrown. and they were all yelled down. They were told to stop, and they went and cleaned it up and threw it in the trash can.
They were, yeah, and it's like any notion of violence or any notion of what could be seen as like inciting any sort of real unrest towards police has been discouraged. And it's not that it hasn't happened, but that's, to me, man, that's been the, I guess the most discouraging thing is that not just from mainstream media, not just from police, but there are large there's a large group of people in this country that are grouping hundreds of thousands of peaceful protesters in with rioters. And it's like, if you think that that's even more than 2 or 3% of people nationwide, I mean, I can politely say it because we're on air. You're wrong, but it's just like, that's not you. Just people are really quick to say, not all cops, and it's like, well, please extend that same courtesy to protesters.
That's a great point. I want to extend, just to piggyback off what you're saying, extend that to the youth that are really leading this movement, right? Like you said, most of these people that we see out there are between the 18 to 22 or 24 age range. And it might not be the most organized to beginning, but nobody really saw these things coming.
And at least they give a shit.
Yeah, exactly. And as a teacher, I'll tell you this, as a teacher, and I did run into a couple of some of my old students from from one of my schools that I won't mention.
Holy shit, dude.
But as a teacher, I've had kids that have come out of low income neighborhoods that have gotten 4-year degrees and full rides and stuff. But nothing would make me prouder than to see somebody not do something for themselves, but take a stand for somebody else and witness them down there downtown protesting and stuff. So I think that was really cool. And I understand rioting is going on, but like everything else, I do want to commend the 98% that are out there doing it the correct way, and included in that population are those 18 to 22.
Well, there's no shortage of like internet statistics, but like, when's the last time that you saw all 50 states show solidarity like this? Like, when's the last time all 50 states had thousands of people in the streets for anything?
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't even say that about the civil rights movement, unfortunately.
They're protesting in Kentucky too.
I'm sure.
Hey, there was a protest in New Braunfels, so if there's a protest in New Braunfels, no matter how small, there's a protest in.
I saw a picture in Boise, Idaho, with thousands of people.
Wow.
And it's like, and it's like, if Boise, Idaho, and New Braunfels, Texas, if those places are out in force, then I feel like the cause has some. It's obvious that the cause has some validity.
Yeah, but I wanna stay on this, JB, but I wanna go to a specific topic on this. That, what are some of your thoughts on media portrayals of these and what solution or what would you talk about with this media portrayal of these protests and what they're about?
Well, I think it's no mystery. I think that you can. I think it's no mystery that with the media is they want extremes. They want newsworthy things, and unfortunately, in this country, newsworthy means violence, crime, all sort of that sort of thing. The occasional heartwarming thing that actually doesn't mean very much, but they want violence. And so the way that I've seen it portrayed is that rioting is burning U.S. cities to the ground, and that it's this widespread thing. And it's just like, well, how many times have you seen video on mainstream media of protesters stopping people from rioting and scolding and exiling people after they're breaking shit, after they're trying to incite stuff? And so it's like, right now, for example, one of the most I haven't been there personally to witness it, but in my opinion, one of the most tense places in the country right now, just because of their history and willingness to speak out, is in Seattle. And so I've got a friend there at the moment that's been on the front lines of that shit, and it's like, it's portrayed in the media as like, well, these protesters are aggressive, and it's like the police have done quite a bit against them, but it's like, that's not portrayed. So it's like, I'm not saying that every single person in the crowd in Seattle or New York or Atlanta has been an angel, but they're definitely over 90% of them are peaceful people. And so it's like, for me, if you're the police, how do you respond to illegal activity? You respond when it's reported.
Yeah.
You don't judge an entire crowd for the actions of a few. And it's like that. I would like that same courtesy extended to protesters, because that's the first thing you hear when it comes to police brutality is, well, not all cops. It's like, well, one person throws a brick or throws a water bottle or throws anything, and now that's a gas canister that's, you know, illegal in warfare, but that can be used in American streets. And it's like, now a peaceful crowd for the most part is being gassed and being shot.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of this stuff that you're seeing, there's pictures online. It's like, I encourage you guys, don't just watch TV because it's too graphic for them to show. Go online and see some of the injuries that peaceful protesters are getting. They're not rioters. They're not breaking anything. They're not damaging anything. They're not threatening anyone, but they're catching rubber bullets to the face for exercising their First Amendment. And so for me, to stay on topic, I would very much appreciate if the mainstream media, I don't know, did some fucking journalism and said, hey, what these police departments are doing in these cities is not all right.
Yeah.
And it's like, just the same as you're saying that rioting's not all right, looting's not all right. We all three agree on that, by the way. And it's like, if that's not all right, then please report it when a peaceful crowd gets gassed and batoned and flashbanged and shot with rubber bullets. And it's like, I haven't seen very much of that at all on mainstream media. So of course, boomers and of course older people are going to watch the news and think that it's all violent or that it's all criminal mischief.
Sean, off of that, a similar question. We've talked about this quite a bit, that it's been in the news that the militarization, use of military to either guard, or what are your thoughts on some of the side effects that has, and what that might mean for this country?
Well, let me kind of blend the two between the media and the military there. If you haven't seen it already, you need to check out the picture of the National Guard standing outside the Lincoln Memorial.
Powerful.
I think that is, you know, regardless of how you feel about the president's response in activating the National Guard, that is one of these pictures that's going to be in the textbooks, you know, when this is all said and done. And it's moving, you know. There's just, you can't even describe. I can't describe in one sentence or words, you know, the emotions that picture brings about. And to be honest, and like Justin said, do your due diligence, and you know, some people are out there not just to fight for injustice, but they want to see for themselves. They don't want to rely on the mainstream media, you know, and I think that's something that both sides can find middle ground on right there. And some people are out there to just kind of see it for themselves. They want to experience it for themselves. And like Justin said, if this is an issue of acceptable use of force, you have to ask yourself, is it acceptable to respond to a group of peaceful protesters who at the most, from my experience that I saw with my own eyes, at the very most can be accused of throwing a half empty water bottle in the direction of police that are decked out in military style gear, right?
Yeah.
In military style gear. Is it acceptable use at that point to start using chemical agents against them? Because that's what's happening. That's the reality of it. Our Second Amendment is not policed like they policed our First Amendment right to assemble this past weekend. And if that was the case, I think over here in Texas, that would finally be what people finally come out of their homes to do, you know. But again, you can't say that, well, this amendment is more important to the next or whatever. But
no, but I'm saying I encourage people. I'm trying to talk to people that might have different views from my own. I encourage you to go out and to seek media from people that are there. So not what your local station's telling you, not what anything on TV is telling you. Actually, go on there and see what people are being subjected to. So right now, it's like, am I opposed to anybody like defending their property and defending their business? Absolutely not. But it's like, when it comes to people that are peacefully assembling, not damaging anything, not hurting anybody, not attacking police at all, but peacefully gathering per the First Amendment, and they're being gassed, they're being flashbanged, they're being shot with rubber bullets, and it's like, some of these injuries are fucking horrifying.
And it's like before any of that happens.
And it's like, if you honestly can watch those things and see those things, and you can be okay with that, then we differ. But for you for someone to be okay with that, it's like you don't even have to agree with the with the cause. I wish you would, but if you're all right with peaceful protesters being fired on and being assaulted by police, then that's an issue, and that goes to show how divided we are as a country.
Yeah. Next phase of this that we wanted to go over was Donald Trump and his response to this. I think it is no longer political in any way to say that Donald Trump has failed us in his duties. In times like these, regardless of what party, it's just pretty basic. Day one, phase one, responsibility to try and reach out and heal and unite. And instead, he's retracted and continued to leech onto his base and spark outrage. And it's something to where now you're seeing a lot of moderate, apolitical people starting to kind of finally talk about how like this is getting to the point where it's the truth is about slapping you in the face. So what are some of your thoughts on Trump's recent tweets, his responses and lack thereof, and all things attached?
First of all, man, I commend to whoever's sitting in the seat fact checking Donald Trump. That is, you have the best job security in the world.
That's a full-time fucking job.
It's a full-time job for an entire committee. But to my understanding, just kind of talking about Donald Trump and taking it back to the militarization of the police and activating the National Guard. To my understanding, it was the president's call to the governors, kind of pleading with them to take on. He's activating the National Guard. Hey, they're here if you'd like to use them. But I think, to my understanding, the final call comes upon the governors, right? Correct. And I've seen a map
for National Guard,
yeah. So I've seen a map where clearly most of the southern states and you can't really divide the lines between an electoral map or anything, because there are blue states that have taken on the National Guard, but there are many that have not, for whatever reason. But what I saw recently was that the Department of Defense, or the Secretary of Defense, he tried to call that off, and I think again that's going to be an issue where it falls upon the governors to make the final decision if they'd like to call the National Guard off. But when it comes to Donald Trump, I guess my opinion falls on, I take it back to the 2016 campaign where he declares himself the law and order candidate. And that's what he's gonna hang his hat on.
That's a euphemism for something else, by the way, but we won't say it.
Exactly. And it's hard to take him seriously, like you were saying, Dustin, when the law and order candidate, you've been here for almost 4 years now, and you've been in charge of this lawlessness, and you've over and over again just not appearing for subpoenas. Like you've painted yourself as a dictator who is above the law, but you're a law and order candidate. It just, the two sides just don't fit together.
Yeah, man. I mean, I like I said, I wish we had the graphic for you guys to see, but I mean, if you Google images, National Guard in Washington D.C., you'll see this image will at least be in the plethora of images, but it's a little bit stirring to see. To see people in military fatigues and military gear at the Lincoln Memorial, and it's like you're telling me police can't handle that? Like, and people have differed, online. It's a shitstorm of arguments. If it's like people are saying, well, if the police can't control this, then who's next? And it's like, well, when's the last time you had to see active duty combat boots on the ground? And it's like right now it's National Guard, but Trump just said the other day, it's like he's willing to use the military to put this stuff down. And it's like, as we've discussed before, it's a very small percentage of the protests that are actually resulting in rioting. And it's like, well, maybe if you diverted manpower and resources from attacking peaceful protesters and peaceful demonstrations, maybe you'd be able to stop some of that rioting.
Yeah.
But we don't have to get too deep into that, but it's just like whenever a president is trying to invoke an act from the early 1800s that's still illegal from a thing in 1878, by the way, but it's like whenever that is where you go to deal with protests, it's like that's pretty indicative of the leadership in my opinion.
The nation's capital, if you told me that it was under military occupation, I wouldn't know otherwise if I was just looking at the images on social media from people that are actually there, from people that are actually there.
Well, no, that's I mean that brings us to the next to another point. It's like he's there to do a photo op with a Bible in front of St. John's Church in D.C. And what how did that come about? There were protesters there. Well, did they leave? No, they were forced out, right, by military police actually, with gas canisters and rubber bullets. And it's just like, if you don't see an issue with that, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how many memes, and this is based off of where we're from. I don't know how many memes talking about, if you have more of a problem with Trump with a Bible in front of a church than a riot, that's where the problem's at. And it's like, well, actually, I don't give a shit that he has a photo op with a Bible in front of a church. In fact, it would be really stupid for him not to play to his base at this point. So I don't care about the photo op. I care about what happened to make the photo op possible. I care that peaceful protesters were dispersed with gas and rubber bullets to make it happen. That's what the issue is for you guys. For you guys that might be wondering, that's what the issue is with. It's not with the phony photo op.
Okay, first the whole. Let's just real quick now that we're on the church issue. To me, it was an emotional response. It was a shot at his ego that word got out that he was hiding in a bunker, right? That the protests and the riots got. Whether they were out of hand, the response from his security service detail was, "Hey, we need to take you to this bunker," and it was a shot at his ego. It was a response to everybody. Hey, I'm gonna show that I'm gonna walk out in these streets. But the problem when it comes to, the religion is, I question if has he even walked into that church? Has he opened that book?
Hey, it was the funniest soundbite I've ever. Maybe one of the funniest I've ever seen with Trump. And somebody tweeted it and said, sound on. You might not think at this point that it matters if you have the sound on or not, but it matters. And so I listened to it at the very end. Some reporter or somebody on the street yells out, like, "Is that your Bible?" And he says, "It's a Bible," and that was it. And it just reminds you, like, we're not this is not a religious podcast, but if you're under the impression that Trump is any notion of any religion, you might have to rethink that one.
Yeah.
Dustin, what do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, off of that, I agree with what you're saying. Him politicizing a faith is both a joke and shows sometimes the depth of the knowledge of some of his followers. I wanted to quickly transfer over, to one of the more, I feel like, independent people that you would say is nowhere close to a liberal, and General Malthus.
Mattis, yeah.
General Mattis. I'm sorry, yeah. He came out about an hour before we came on and excoriated Donald Trump. Said, it's like, I'm sure by the time we're done at this, he'll have posted one liberal, somehow posted in his simple. I thought it was pretty interesting that, talking about how he's the first president in his lifetime that doesn't try to unite the American people and doesn't even pretend to try. Instead, he is very blatant on how he tries to divide us. So I said, I'm sure eventually he'll turn into a bleeding liberal, but I thought it was a pretty interesting take from someone who has been pretty apolitical over his career and served for both two Republican presidents at one point.
Yeah. So imagine trying to paint Mad Dog Mattis as a bleeding heart liberal bastard.
Yeah. They'll find a way. They will. We don't have to imagine for long, but they'll. I thought that was very interesting.
Hey, but he has a history of doing this, man. Like before Mattis, it was McCain, right? You're just poking fun of McCain, being a prisoner of war.
You name it, and it's just like, I know it's a cliche, and I know it's just like there's a lot of uneducated people around the country that, dictator and Hitler and this and that, but it's like a lot of this behavior is not it's textbook dictator shit. And it's like, there's some checks and balances that exist to slow him down, but it's like, from the approach to the media to criticism of anybody that speaks out against you, and it's like, let's not even talk about Obama because that'll enrage a lot of people. If you talk about any other president ever, they take opposition almost with a grain of salt. It's like, well, I'm in power, bitch, and whatever. But it's like, this guy, he's so emotional and takes it so personal that there are like hardline conservatives that are on the outs with him. And it's like nobody's going to accuse Mattis or like Rex Tillerson, his original Secretary of State. Nobody's going to accuse like Jim Sessions. It's like if there was a caricature of a Confederate like living in modern times, it's Jim Sessions. And he's on the outs with Trump. Like Trump actively campaigned against him. And so it's like, how long before people realize like, hey, man, this guy's not just against the libs. He's not just owning the libs. He's literally going against anybody that says a word against him. And it's like, again, Google's a decent tool. I'm not a huge fan of the corporation, but it's a decent tool. If you look up narcissism, you might find what you're looking for.
You mentioned Barack Obama. I found it interesting that Trump has handled it so poorly that this is such unique times that he felt the need to address the nation. Like it's one of those that talk about being in an awkward spot, Jesus. Being the former president and just kind of waiting. Like, all right, waiting. Okay, well, I guess I'll take the best man duties here and give my speech, and it was great and composed. But how sad is that the retired former president has to be the one who tries to address the nation on these trying times?
Please, nobody tell Trump about the rating, whatever the ratings were for that. I didn't tune in. I followed the speech, but please don't tell him what the ratings were because that could be bad.
Justin, don't you know that Trump's worst speech ever was literally 15 times greater than that? I saw it on a tweet. I know it's real because it wasn't fact checked.
Speaking of tweets, right?
Yeah.
How many times? And I mean, you guys could do the math if you don't believe ours. But how many times do you reckon Trump spoke out on Colin Kaepernick on the kneeling protests?
About as many times as he compared himself to Abraham Lincoln.
Oh yeah. No, but it's like if you've spoken out countless times, like probably hundreds of times about athletes and entertainers and this and that, like taking a knee. But how many times have you spoken about needs for reform in law enforcement? And how many times have you spoken about police profiling and police brutality and all these things? And it's like, there are literally hundreds of tweets dedicated from the President of the United States. And there are hundreds of tweets dedicated to much more minor issues than this. And it's just like, well, when it comes to the issue at hand that hundreds of thousands of Americans, probably millions at this point, are taking part in, you don't mention it. You don't touch it.
This is my thing where you're talking about like, okay, if we're looking at, because Donald Trump did in the last 24 hours, he did tweet, and you can go and check it out yourself. Maybe it'll get fact checked later, but he did say when it comes to presidents doing things for African Americans, he is probably, and he says he's probably second, if not first, to Abraham Lincoln. Yeah. And my issue with this is this: you can go. You
have an issue with that?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I took an
Sean,
issue.
You don't believe him?
I've read a couple of history books, just teaching it myself and studying it in college. So
taught it once or twice, right?
Yeah, I might have read a couple things where I could disagree a little bit, but I will say this: under Trump's presidency, they did pass the First Step Act, and I took an issue the other day with somebody that was kind of defending that as a platform in which President Trump kind of took a step in the right direction, given its name, to help African Americans in the criminal justice system, trying to get rid of what are those minimum sentencing? Sentencing. And so the issue is the same people that are pushing for it are also the same ones that are the first to criticize and to participate in the character assassinations of this week's African American. And so it's like you can't say that you're doing something you can't say I'm doing something for African Americans on one hand, and then the very next breath you're criticizing Colin Kaepernick for peacefully protesting. It's where's the consistency in that? Coach Pop, I think Coach Pop put it really best in his outburst to Trump. He said it real simply. He said, Donald Trump could end this all by saying 3 words, by saying Black Lives Matter. And his simple refusal to do that, his silence just speaks volumes. It speaks for itself.
Well, no, but that's the thing though, is it's just like, that's I I actually don't even know if he tweeted anything for Martin Luther King Day, but it's like that ties into another thing. It's just like he's not the only politician that won't say those words. He's not the only and I mean, he is the shittiest, don't get me wrong, but it's like he's not the only one that's not saying those words. He's not the only one that doesn't care to speak out or identify the problem. But on Martin Luther King Day, these guys are very eager to use that name and very eager to reference nonviolent protests and civil rights movement. But it's just like when it comes down to it, are they willing to put their name on the line? Are they willing to put their career out there to speak on it? No, they're not. And it's like you're actually talking about a guy that was assassinated. You're actually talking about a guy that polled. When they polled back then, he had a 75% like dislikability, like unfavorable rating, like for a public figure. And it's like he was actually one of the most unpopular figures in America at the time of his assassination. And it's like, furthermore, if you want to read anything about MLK's social values and economic values, it's just like they don't mention the fact that, I don't know, his economic views are much more akin to democratic socialism than they are unhinged capitalism. And it's like, it's convenient, but it's like Trump doesn't even take that route. It's like he's not even going to take the Biden PC approach to this issue. He's not going to mention it at all. It's like George Floyd, I think in his speech the other day, that was 17 seconds of a 15-minute speech. That's how much focus it got. The rest of it is a flex session of talking about, I'm going to use the military, governors are being weak, blah blah blah. And it's just like, not only is he not even doing the dog and pony thing for MLK's cause, you have no interest in even touching it.
Absolutely. I think this is all weighty stuff. I think one of the things that we really wanted to get across in this podcast, we've all come from more conservative. We grew up in conservative places, and so we have that social media network that follows us around. And I think the weightiest thing that I'd like to talk about from everybody is recognizing what this movement is actually about. If I feel like there's one misconception after another, it's always trying to decide, well, George Floyd's killer has now been in custody. What more do you want? Yeah. And the postings, like the postings from very conservative people that don't believe in this, they'll post MLK quote out of context and try and And I think that we need to have that discussion. And I'm going to lead off with Sean here, but can you give some depth to those people that are what else do you want, Sean? We arrested the guy.
Yeah.
What that Facebook post? Yeah. What do you say to that?
That's going to come in the next. They're probably already out there right now. Well, why are y'all out there protesting right now? They just arrested the other four. And I want to be really clear when people are trying to make the comparison, or they're trying to make the statement or the argument that this is just one bad out. This isn't just one bad cop.
No.
That day there was 4 for 4. And that's why the other 3 are getting charged. That's what it's about. It's the simple fact that it only took one of them. It only would have took one of them to speak up to stop all of this chaos from unfolding.
Yeah.
And they decided to hide behind that thin blue line or that blue shield and disregard justice. That the Asian cop that was kind of in the front of, I can't get it off my mind just watching the film. The 2 things that stuck out to me is a grown man crying for his mother.
Who's dead, by the way.
And the second thing is the cop standing there, the Asian cop standing there, repeatedly saying over and over again, it's why you shouldn't do drugs. It's why you shouldn't do drugs. As if that had anything to do with the situation that George Floyd was in.
Yeah. It's just very frustrating to me, man, because like I said, where we're all from, it's actually an 830 thing going on here, but it's some of us from south of the city, some of us from north of the city. But when it comes down to it, there's such a fundamental misunderstanding of what this is about and why you should be upset and what's going on. It's just like, if I could speak directly to those, it's like, take a moment Like take a small moment to step outside of yourself. And it's like that gets thrown around a lot. People say, well, view things, walk in somebody else's shoes. That gets mentioned a lot in churches, I think. But it's like,
does
actually, yeah, Dustin can confirm. I can't, but Dustin can. It gets thrown around a lot. Walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, and it's like you're not willing to go outside yourself and say, man, what is it like for them? So it's not my experience, but it's their experience, or they're at least saying that it's their experience. What's it like? And there's not even that willingness, and that's what's disturbing to me. And when it comes down to it, it's just like, man, the last time I checked, a lot of these people that are on, I guess that you could define as the opposition to the current movement, I'd be willing to wager that they self-identify as Christians. And it's just like, that's not my experience. That's not my thing. But I don't think there's a part in that about not loving your neighbor and not listening to your neighbor. It's not a thing. And I just can't, it's hard for me to understand how there's not even the remote empathy. Yeah. And even on a non-religious note, it's just like when it comes to patriotism, there's people that really, really wave that flag. So if it's times of war, if it really, for any excuse, actually, really, really wave the flag. But when it comes down to giving a shit about the plight of some of your fellow Americans, and if you're really talking about what it means to be an American, it's like if you see an underdog or if you see somebody that's being treated unfairly, it's astounding to me that the flag waving extends to almost everything except my countrymen are brutalized by police and are killed by police at a rate much, much different and much, much disparaged compared to any other race. And it's like they're patriots except when it comes to that, and I can't understand it.
Now, well, to defend, I'll keep this part short, but to defend, what you're saying too. I mean, if you want to go biblical with that, and I do consider myself a man of faith. I don't think that's really here or there with this particular topic, but if you want to go biblical on that Jesus does basically, to the modern term, right in the temple when things aren't just. So there's a little bit of that for the Christians out there, but we'll keep that short on that. So one thing that what I tried to find a very specific thing, and I just recommend people out there to go to the useofforceproject.org. You're talking about what are some goals from this, and this has been going on since the riots in Baltimore took place. That there's a organization that's been tracking this, and very interesting. If they talk about, I listened to a 2-hour podcast twice on this, that they're talking about how difficult it is just to find police rules. That you would think that the citizens would be allowed to know how cops are allowed to kill and arrest them.
Nope.
But that's not the case. They have actually created by leaps and bounds with under $200,000 of funding per year. That's including salaries. They've been able to through lawyers, donations, they've been of time and so this is the 8 simple rules that minimizes police violence by 72%. So this is not a marginal.
Pay attention to this list. So if you've been casually listening, I'm inviting you to engage and listen to this list. It's really, really good. And it cuts down on police violence by how much?
72%.
That's a lot for those of you listening. That's a significant percentage.
You guys are going to assume. I assumed when I heard all this and I started researching, like, okay, there's going to be a miracle in the bottle one. You guys tell me which one of these is difficult. Okay, so 1, failing to acquire officers to de-escalate situations. So just slowly backing away, removing distance, not having verbal, arguments, like pretty easy. 2, allowing officers to choke or strangle civilians. Okay, so nothing crazy so far. 3, failing to require officers to intervene and stop excessive force. So insert that person. Hey, stop someone who's doing something wrong. That's your job. Your job is to,
if not, you're complicit.
And the term is render aid, right? Your job is to render aid. So these we're 3 for 3 so far, and being pretty simple.
Yeah.
4, failing to restrict officers from shooting at moving vehicles.
That doesn't seem hard.
No,
but it's in the movies, Dustin.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess if it's in Bad Boys 2 or in, any of our
you
favorite,
can shoot at cars.
but yeah, so don't shoot at moving vehicles.
Yeah.
You end up hitting something that's normally not your target,
Right.
or if you hit the target, it's now a weapon going into potential civilians.
That's
so pretty simple so far. Failing to develop a force continuum that limits the type of force and/or weapons that can be used to respond to specific types of resistance. Failing to require officers to exhaust all other reasonable means before resorting to deadly force. So don't pull out your gun. Don't close grounds.
Maybe don't shoot first.
Yeah. Failing to require officers to give a verbal warning. So that's not real hard. Hey, I'm gonna pull my weapon. I'm gonna just telling them what their action is. So again, and then 8, failing to require officers to report each time they use force or threaten to use force against civilians. So just forcing them to report it. Like these things, I read all 8 of these. And it shows in this thing, if you scroll down, it shows the 100 biggest police forces in our country. You're going to most likely find your city. And it shows which of these 8 things your current police force has. And it gives you a simple note on how to send it to the governor, how to send it to how the police in your area, and get that. Most of them, looking at that, don't have 3 out of the 8. And you think these are pretty basic common sense things. So if you're looking for something that can directly, 72%, when I heard that the first time, I had to rewind. I thought it was like, oh, I must miss it. Was 17%, 72% reduction of violent crimes.
Yeah. I got
significant.
I got another thing where we're talking about like the future outlook and where we're going from here as far as policing goes. I know it's something that's been mentioned many, many times when it comes to the hiring practices of police and having their demographics match the communities in which they serve. I didn't have a lot of time, but in my quick research, I saw that in 2013, so we're a little bit dated on this data, but in 2013, Minneapolis, for example, had a white population of 60% in their city, but their police force was made up of 80% white police officers. And when it came to their African-American population, they were 18% African-American, and only 9% African-Americans were represented on the police force. So that's just on a fundamental level. When you're asking like, what's the first thing that I can do when we're talking about this? Have your police force look like the people that they police.
Absolutely.
It's simple as that. It doesn't go much further.
Yeah.
The second thing is after this weekend's events, not only what I saw with my own eyes, but on Twitter as well, after all of the police gear, the riot gear, the military grade gear that I saw, you can't tell me there is zero excuse for every police officer in this country to have a damn body cam. If you can afford a riot shield, if you can afford
a gas mask,
if you can afford the chemical agents to put on peaceful protesters, you can sure as hell afford a body cam for every single one of your police officers. There's no excuses there.
No, and that's a thing that's going on in cities around this country right now. It's like, is it really that much to ask? So is it really that much to ask that you don't gas peaceful protesters? You don't cover your badges, which is going on in Seattle and a bunch of other cities right now. You don't cover your badges with your badge numbers, actually. And then the body cams, and it's just like the thing that happened in Louisville. Innocent man killed by police, and his body's left in the street for 12 hours. And it's like the police
man has been feeding cops.
That's right, been feeding cops
free.
Yeah, and the police chief's fired, and those guys are fired, and so forth. But it's like every single one of them had their body cam turned off, and it's like that's not a coincidence. And it's like, for these standards seem simple. I just wish that people would have that same energy, would keep that same energy about these small standards, these easy standards, as they do of how you should protest and how you should rise up against injustice.
And the last, let me just make a point here. Like, when you're trying to reform things, like, you need to make a damn example out of somebody, man. Like, let's be honest. If the cops involved in Eric Garner's murder are tried and convicted, and that trial took 5 years, if they're tried and convicted, George Floyd is alive today.
Yeah.
No questions asked.
And
no questions asked.
fun fact. That's 2014. Those guys aren't fired until 2019, and no charges are brought against them
At all.
And it's like, if you want to know what the marches are about, look that up.
Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. So fast forward to 2020, George Floyd. You have an opportunity to make a statement, to make an example, and at the bare minimum, what we're talking about here is probable cause. All you need to arrest somebody is probable cause. And the AG plays it safe over there. They start with third-degree murder and manslaughter. They don't touch the other 3 officers that are complicit. You can't sit here and tell me, and I'll be damned, I'll stand corrected if it comes out later. But you can't stand here and tell me that you didn't have that today. You have more evidence than you did a week ago to arrest those other 3 officers.
Yeah.
If you're talking about de-escalating situations, how about you de-escalate the entire damn nation and you charge the people and you hold them accountable when it happens and not a week later?
Well, how about that also being part of why we do what we do? That if public pressure is currently a motivator,
it makes a difference
for justice to be served, that can be basically a point A for why we find
justice is how we define it.
Note that the Civil Rights Act was passed on day 8 of the riots that were associated with that.
With MLK.
Yeah. And it's not a coincidence. But to piggyback off what Sean said about who's policing what, this is a much larger issue that is not the subject of this podcast. But when you talk about the type of people that are becoming police officers in America, I think the latest statistic I've seen is something like just over 20% of all cops have passed military service. So if you are a Canadian police officer and you have military experience, that's a little bit different. If you are from Finland and you have military experience, that's a little bit different. If you come from the United States and you have military experience, that's significant, because if you guys were unaware, we've been involved in a war or two recently. And so this is over 1/5 of the people that are in these police forces. And there's PTSD involved in that. There are issues that come back with that. And I just found this out the other day. Often they're not obligated to go through those tests. They're not obligated. Those people are hired, and this has happened since the first Gulf War.
Yeah.
And those are people that are in leadership positions,
which is not unimportant timing. That happening in 1990s would now make it toward those men are now police chiefs.
Absolutely, they are chiefs. Yeah. They are chiefs, and they are officers, and they are in leadership positions. And so it's like this is not a jab at the military, but it's to say, if you come from one of the most militarized Western nations ever, and those guys are becoming police, that there's a certain amount of aggression that comes from serving in a war zone, and rightfully so, to policing American populations.
Right.
And it's like that plays a role.
And JB, let me ask you to delve a little deeper into this, and I'm going to give a little bit of mine that like you said, this isn't an anti-military take. This is a conversion. This is a conversion of, you are asking someone to go from a warrior to a protector. But in doing that, we're not saying that's not something you can do, but have proper screening, have those things that seem basic to make sure that if your job is to be put into extreme situations, that you're mentally, is there a more important job in this country to have mental screening and background checks to the mental state that you're in?
Not at all. And that's my thing. Is it's not to say that, oh well, if you're ex-military, you shouldn't be a cop. No, not at all. But it's to say,
just do due diligence.
How are there not mental health screenings for that?
Right.
And then furthermore, it's just like, hey man, whatever it is, 6 months at an academy might not be enough to. And it's like, if you're policing a small town of 3,000 that you grew up in, then maybe it's a bit different than if you're a white guy policing, I don't know, an area in Baton Rouge, Alton Sterling a few years ago. And it's just like, I get it. Whenever people say, oh, well, these are bad neighborhoods, these are the numbers, these are the crime rates. Yeah. But that's a job where you carry a gun and you carry authority. And it's like, man, if you're scared, there are plenty of churches in this country. Let me tell you, If you're scared, that's where if you're scared, go to church. But if you're policing a neighborhood that you are scared to police, and that you're kind of you're trigger happy, or that you're on edge to police, then you probably shouldn't be on that beat. And that's an issue that it's not comfortable to address. But it's like, man, I get it that some of these places are unsavory. I get it. But it's like, where most of America, I guess, where, in my opinion, where we get it wrong, nobody wants to address why those neighborhoods are that way. Yeah. They're content to say, well, they're bad. And it's like, well, yes, they are. But don't police them if you're approaching them in a scared tone, or if you think that you've got to have a hand on the trigger at all times.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like, I think a couple of simple things, like statistically, what a couple different programs have shown that like you guys are talking about, there's an actual number to it for if you can increase your black police force to 35%. Again, it's a drastic reduction. One of the most crazy statistics of that is there's 3 cities in America that currently fit that bill.
What are they, by the way? We didn't ask.
I didn't grab those. It was in a news, and I will bring that up for next week. Okay. Or I'll put it in the comments. The second thing, and this may seem a little racist, that just like the way it's phrased, but these people that talk about this, is the importance of community involvement in this. So I know it might be like, hey, get the cops to go throw the football with the brown and black babies, and I get like it may seem like, but it actually works. Like, it humanizes people. Like, so it may seem like it but that's been proven statistically, that if you get there to be some human relationship, whether it be a barbecue, whether it be throwing the football, shooting the basketball, that those neighborhoods are legitimately safer after that. And so those are a couple things. And then the third we talked about already is let your citizens know the damn rules. Like, it blows my mind that of the 100 biggest cities, 30 of them, they had to hire a lawyer to be able to understand what cops are and aren't allowed to do to their civilians.
Yeah. Well, and what you said is huge. And it's just like, a lot of stuff comes off as a photo op or as a cliche or whatever, but it's just like the police officers that I've spoken to across the board say that things are easier when they know the people on their beat, and when they interact with the people on their beat. And so again, this is not it never was an anti-police rant, but it's to say, there needs to be a fundamental change in the overall way that things are done. So it's not to say that nobody's ever done a good job or ever given a shit about people on their beat, but it's like, if you know the people you're policing, I would imagine that you are less likely to commit police brutality, less likely to commit an offense. And actually, it's not that there won't be crime in that community, but they'll actually at least respect you, and they'll actually at least care to know what you're allowed to do. I want
to go to Sean here in a second, but something off of what you said that I thought Pop made an incredible point, and that's Pop and an incredible point becomes synonymous. I think a lot of times when he's talking, but he talked about how he made. I thought it was a very eloquent thing where 20 years ago, when our parents were our age, drunk driving wasn't a big deal. It was something that wasn't talked about, and through education, through understanding, now there's moms against drunk driving. There's things that we all know about it. We grew up understanding it. We understand that the risk you put on your own life and others, and that was something where in 20 years that's developed. And he's talking about that needs to be how this goes, where there's a general understanding, and there's things set in place. And I thought it was a really nice way to put that. But Sean, JB and I have been hogging the ball for a couple of possessions. We wanted to throw it over to you and let you get a couple shots up.
No, I definitely agree with you. And what you're talking about there, Dustin, when you're talking about, and it works both ways, when you're talking about community relations, and you're talking about that, whether it's a sound bite or a video clip of an officer shooting hoops with some African-American kids. I will also be the one to caution you to look at those things, in a lens where it's a critical lens, because when I was at the protest, if you're here in San Antonio and you turn on the news, you will see Chief McManus, interacting, engaging with a young person of color. He was 4 years old. And they're embracing there, and then they take this young boy, to kind of, give a high five with these police that are geared up and decked out in riot shields. But I will also say that was the only time that I saw Chief McManus. The same exact way as that was the only time we saw Donald Trump when he stepped outside the White House for a photo op. Yeah. And so for some, I'm not saying like if it comes from the right place in your heart, like when we were protesting yesterday and outside the steps of Bexar County Courthouse, and and we saw the sheriffs kind of take a knee in solidarity. If it comes from the right place in your heart, there's no question about it. Embrace those guys because they didn't have to do that. And I thought that was a strong position that they took because they didn't have to do that at all. But when it goes to the other side, just kind of looking through a critical lens and looking at Chief McManus, I thought that I took that as nothing as a photo op. I didn't think that anything about that was genuine.
Absolutely a photo op, because what happened right after that, Sean?
Yeah, the kid wasn't
fucking riot. The guys in riot gear were pushing people over scooters, and were funneling people forcefully into a street that they were already peacefully assembled in before.
Yeah.
So it's like to me that there's the symbolism for you. Yeah. It's like they got the picture, they got the KSAT was there to get that image, and then right after that, move or we will move you.
Yeah, I don't want to be painted as, well, Sean's just being negative. This that. You have to look at it critically, man. We can't say that. Yeah. We can't say that 100 years of Jim Crow are just going to be erased with this small gesture of taking. It doesn't work like that, man. If it worked like that, we'd have been far past all this, man. You have to, if you want change, you have to change people's hearts, and that's what it comes down to. In my profession, when you have a kid that acts out in the classroom and they're unruly, you have two choices. You can either, one, you can throw the book at the kid, you can write them up. They're going to get their 3 days in ISS. The admin will handle it. You can come down hard on them, or you can show them empathy, because more times than not, 99% of the time, this kid is acting out for a reason, and that's, to me, that's kind of where we're missing it. When more people are saying, well, look at the rioting, or he had drugs in his system, or a fake $20. None of that shit matters. None of that shit matters to me. This is an entire community crying out, and they're going to be heard one way or another. And if it's uncomfortable to you, well, too damn bad.
Yep.
Too damn bad.
We're going to finish this up. We have about 10 minutes left. Just going to want to give each one of us a chance to talk about where do we go, and maybe personally why this matters. Sean, I'll kind of roll back to you, and then I'll take it. Then JB will let you close this out, man.
Yeah. Just real quick, and for my little closing here, one of my favorite quotes is after storms come rainbows, man. And I think that this will end eventually, and the change that come from it is going to define this generation. For better or for worse. And one thing that I just want to say when it comes to social media, because that's where most of us are interacting right now with each other, is I think that our family and our friends that serve on police on police departments, they have a real unique opportunity here. They have an opportunity to stand in solidarity, whether it's something as simple as a gesture as simple as taking a knee, or maybe you only feel comfortable. I don't care if you change your profile to black out your profile on this past two. Do something. Speak up against what is going on, because when you speak up, you're standing on the side of justice.
Acknowledge the problem.
Exactly. That's all people are asking, is acknowledge that something is going on. And I really want to employ the listeners out there to have a conversation with somebody that doesn't look like you off of social media. Have a conversation in person with somebody that doesn't look like you, that might have different views, regardless of what side you stand on over here. Have a conversation about the recent events in the country, because I hope that from that will come empathy.
Yeah. My closing is going to be why this matters to me. I'm a men's college basketball coach, and the general age range I coach is that 18 to 23.
That's the age range.
Yeah, a lot of, and I have young black men that I look at as family. It's not blood, but it's family, and I feel like it was an opportunity to get to go walk with a young man that I've had the opportunity and privilege to coach. He's an outstanding young man, and man, I can't tell you what it was like that. When we're laying on the ground doing the 9-minute, and I glance over at him, and you can't help but be overwhelmed that could have been him. Yeah. That could have been my player, and the fact of the matter is that can happen to any one of us, no matter the color of our skin. But the rest of us have to have something to happen first. Yeah. Where these black men, that can literally be their crime. That can literally be all that they've done, and that's the thing that I pray and I hope that gets outdated. That gets outdated, like all these things that we've been talking about. That man, I want these young black men to be able to live freely and be able to be in a position where they don't have to fear literally doing nothing and having to worry about just getting pulled over for being black. And I think that's something that we talk about, and my last thing off of that, guys, is please, those of you that are the all lives matter stuff, it's complete bullshit. How in the hell is Black Lives Matter? How does that take away from Black lives? Are a part of all lives. All lives aren't being attacked right now. If it's someone else, we'll be with you too.
No one ever said that your lives didn't matter.
But it's fucking bullshit. And if you're someone who can't say those words, you need to take an honest look at yourself and to ask yourself why. That's me, JB.
Man, it's like I said, man, these are tense times. Politically speaking, I would never expect everyone to believe to believe the same that I believe, or that Dustin or Sean believes, or anything like that. But as we said at the beginning, this is something where there's no room on the fence. You have to choose a side. And what I would ask, and what I would implore on your end is, know your history, please. And I'm biased in that. That's what my degree's in. That's what Sean teaches in school. I'm admittedly biased in that, but know your history, because in this case, to imply that a 400-year head start doesn't play a role in the way our society's been put together and the way people are policed and things like that, it's not only misguided, it's wrong. And I think as a culture and as a country, we're very, very quick to embrace African American culture where it suits us, and it's in many, many avenues. And from rock to blues to hip hop to fashion to everything else, we're sports, by the way. And it's like we're very quick to embrace those things, but when it comes to embracing the roots of the injustices that surround those things and that actually produce those things, as a society, we're much slower to accept them. And I implore you to think independently, and have some sort of empathy towards people that might look different than you. It's tough, man. I like I said, if you're there's still too many people that their response to the current issues are to say that all lives matter, or even blue lives matter. And it's like, how this is the equivalent if we were throwing a fundraiser to raise awareness for lung cancer, and you barge into this event and you say, oh, but this cancer or that cancer is important too. And it's like, no one ever said that it wasn't. No one ever disputed that. But you're taking attention away from the issue at hand, and you're taking attention away from the issue that you never had to deal with. So again, I implore you, a lot of people that are from areas like where we're from, and like where many people in America are from, the diversity is just not, it's not on the same level as it is in major cities, and that's not your fault. But I implore you to think outside of your box and to say, what if that was me? If you were George Floyd, if you were in that same situation, if that same exact situation had happened, maybe you have a $20 bill that's counterfeit, whatever, they call the cops on you. If it's you and not him, if it's a white, Hispanic, Asian, if it's anybody that's not African American, are you still alive today? Yes, you are. And it doesn't seem like a stretch to get the nation to understand that, but at the moment, it's a huge stretch. And so I'm asking you to take yourself to look outside of yourself for a minute and just say, hey, my experience might not be everybody else's experience. And if we can find some sort of common ground there, not all protesters, not even close to all protesters, not even 3% of all protesters are rioters. And if people around the world are demonstrating and showing up at U.S. embassies for something, it's not because it's an internet fad. It's because it's a real thing. And I implore you, if you're not already on board and if you don't already see eye to eye with something that's an issue, I implore you to take a minute and reevaluate.
See you guys next week.
All right.
Yourself from squalor. Mastered academics, cause your grace said you a scholar.